Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us again. In the next hour or so, we hope to leave you all with a little better understanding of the film business and provide some answers and some insights that every filmmaker really ought to consider before entering the arena of documentary film. And one of the first questions we'll ask is, what exactly is a documentary? So, for your consideration, is a documentary just a straight-laced presentation of facts about a certain occurrence or personage without any editorialization or commentary whatsoever? Ooh, excellent. Or can it be something else entirely? Can it actually function as propaganda, where the difference between fact and fiction is difficult to figure out? Are these films presenting an actual occurrence or event that can be objectively substantiated to have taken place or to have existed? Or instead, is it slanted more towards the emotional reality that lies behind the fact? The truth being the subtext to fact. Fact. Willie Loman was found dead early this morning after his car crashed into a large tree. That's what the news reported. The man is dead. But a deeper truth might be, sensing his failure as a man and feeling despondent over his family's future, a salesman down on his luck and living more and more each day in the past, commits suicide for the benefit of his family. Or, deeper still, a man sacrifices himself in order to redeem himself in his family's eyes. So what story would you tell? Or is it merely a question of truth versus honesty versus perception? Food for thought, eh? By way of introduction, my name is Jim Breckenridge. I am founder and director of the Play Crafters Group, and for over 20 years we've helped writers from all over the country further develop their scripts, both for play scripts and screenplays as well. And we happily note that our services have been rated in the top 10 of script analysts from around the country. And joining me today, and to help explore today's subject, we have Clint Flack and Evan Cohen. So, Clint, a lifelong collector, lover of history, joined your own Mercer Museum as exhibit specialist just about 4 years ago, 2020. And through his 20 years of experience in construction, fabrication, conservation, Clint has helped design and build several interactive exhibits for various institutions around the area, including his efforts to conserve and reinstall original tiles on the walls and ceilings of Henry Mercer's Font Hill. I thought that was pretty cool. What brings Clint to our attention is his work with several local and national producers on multiple documentaries, including a recent episode on the Discovery Channel's Expedition Unknown, Trader's Treasure of 1776, where Clint was featured as an expert on the Doan outlaws of Bucks County. And I'm guessing we'll also talk a little bit about the current exhibit, the Doan Gang Outlaws of the Revolution, currently showing at our own Mercer Museum. Now, it's Evan's turn. Evan's a Hudson Valley-based award-winning director and filmmaker with 10 years of experience, largely focused on documentary and commercial work. Evan graduated from the School of Visual Arts with a degree in cinematography and went on to shoot several television and branded commercials, directed nationally broadcast music videos, and worked with prominent brands to create branded content, all before moving into the documentary world. Evan works currently as director, editor, and I believe founder of the company Topaz, working with a variety of production companies, agencies, and brands, and his recent documentary on the Lenape, entitled, must be on another page. Let me see here. I was doing so well. Yes, Keepers of the Way, which premiered at several Oscar-qualifying film festivals, including AMDOX, St. Louis International, Cleveland International Film Festival. The film also won several awards, including Best Storytelling and Documentary at Rome International Film Festival in Rome, Georgia, and the Spirit of Jim Thorpe Award at the Jim Thorpe Independent Film Festival. So welcome, gentlemen all, and our panel, Real Stories About Real People. We are very happy for your patience that you're still here with us today, as well as the patience of our audience. So, very basic question. What got you interested in documentary filmmaking? What excited you or drew you to this particular genre?
Yeah, I'll take this one first. Thanks for having us, first of all. So yeah, I had spent quite a bit of time as a cinematographer, as a director in the commercial world, working in music videos and branded content, and the work was fairly fun. It's fairly fun. It pays well. I think I spent really the first maybe 6-7 years of my professional career doing these things, and what really got me into documentary filmmaking was realizing that creatively I had a greater impetus and draw to non-narrative, non-linear work. And I really enjoyed discovering that as a director, that I can more benefit from work and creatively. I was more flexible and open to doing work where I can meet with subjects and interact with people and follow and find a through line kind of organically, rather than a narrative process of a commercial or a music video or a narrative piece where you're writing a script and turning it into a shot list and creating something that's a little more A plus B equals C. And so that's what ultimately got me into documentary work, and I've slowly shifted my commercial work into doing branded documentaries, for brands, for agencies, and for larger companies. And it's been very fulfilling finding something that creatively is a better fit.
Yeah, I'm guessing both of those areas would complement one another as you move forward in documentary film.
Absolutely. And fortunately for the world that we're in, there's a big appetite, in the commercial world for branded docu-style content, things that aren't some higher budget commercials promoting something. Instead, I think there's a lot of a need and desire for agencies and brands to showcase things that they're doing in the sustainable sector, things that they're doing in the realm of social good. It's kind of serendipitous, and it's right place, right time. So,
question, I guess, for both of you, if this applies. Where do you find your ideas? Do you find the story, or does the story often find you?
From my sense, I think I'm someone who, hasn't produced a documentary in a sense, but I've been headhunted by different people that were making documentaries. So in my perspective, I've been found by Discovery Channel, by other people trying to tell an interesting story about history. All of the documentaries I've made or, been in have all been about history. So it's really people searching for me.
Well, history is obviously a great subject, whether it's long ago or just yesterday. What's been your impression of the process, Clint? And can you tell us a little more about your experience with Expedition Unknown and your part in it?
Sure. And this is a wild story, but I was deeply interested in something called the Doan Outlaws, which was a loyalist gang here in Bucks County that terrorized Bucks County, Western Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey. They robbed tax collectors, all in the name for the British against the American cause. And they supposedly hid out in a cave here in Bucks County. And when I was an 8-year-old boy, I tried to find that cave unsuccessfully. and then ended up finding the entrance to it in 2019 and began excavating it. So it made the news. There was someone who made a documentary about discovery of the opening, and Expedition Unknown, or the producers on Expedition Unknown, saw an article about it. And so I got a phone call last September from a producer on the show saying they had read an article. They've never done a show about revolutionaries during this period of time. And they asked me if, I thought I was about to find anything amazing during this period. But I had dug since 2019 and found nothing but animal bones, really. I'd found different passages, hadn't had time to excavate them out. So after talking to the producers for a little while, they said, there's 12 ideas in the mix right now. We have a whole season planned out. But if you were to keep digging and you find anything amazing, call us. And, maybe we'll come out and film an episode in April. And so I hung up the phone and thought, well, maybe something will happen. And then a month later, on October 7th, I got a phone call from the same producer, and he said, this is crazy, but we're supposed to be in Israel in 2 weeks to film an episode. And obviously that can't happen. So we're in a real tough spot. It usually takes 3 months to put together an episode for the show, and they had 2.5 weeks to do it. So they said I was the person of all the ideas that had the most confidence, that seemed like they could put something together. Is this true? And I said, absolutely. So that's how it started.
I gather you found no money so far.
Well, we did find a coin. We actually, found a coin. When we were talking about doing the episode, and I told them I had found nothing at this period of time, they said, we're in a tough spot. We're going to film an episode. We're going to tell a funny story. It's going to be a compelling story. And, and even if we don't find anything, people are going to learn some history. So great. And they gave me 2 weeks to really dig farther into the cave before they came out. And when I started to dig farther, I found an enormous amount of artifacts. The cave had been filled in just after the Civil War. It was full of all kinds of incredible things. And so they were very excited to come out. And while we were actually filming the episode, we found a coin that was deposited in the cave just after the Civil War. And we discovered a chamber of the cave that had been walled off when the cave was sealed off. And upon going into it, we actually found a whole wall of carvings of initials inside the cave.
Wow.
It was an incredible experience.
I was also curious, did you happen to know Erica Yeager-Smith?
No.
I asked because she was acknowledged in a very good book on screenwriting by Mark Norman called What Happens Next: A History of American Screenwriting. And I don't always look at acknowledgments, but I did on this particular book, and there she was, affiliated with the Mercer Museum.
Okay.
So I was just curious. How do you deal with story structure? How much of it is plotted out beforehand, or is it kind of loose? Do you have a goal, but you don't have it mapped out to follow the yellow brick road there? How does that work for you?
In terms of style, I kind of consider myself like a verite purist. And I know not every documentarian does this, but I get a great deal of joy from going into a subject matter and starting with a semblance or seed of an idea and trying my best to stay open to where the documentary goes, while trying to provide some semblance of parameters for myself. So it's not just super loosey-goosey. Personally, I get a lot out of that process. So I try to go in with a pretty clear intent. I like to be very well researched and diligent and sensitive. More often than not, I like to try to have a relationship with the subject before I participate with them. I know not everyone does that. Some people show up with a camera on day one. I really like to develop a relationship over time and kind of set parameters and set boundaries and figure out where the power structures are and who's comfortable with what and what's not comfortable. And so in short, I try to lay down a pretty clear foundation, and then whatever falls into place kind of falls into place. And I think it goes without saying too. So much of the story structure comes out in the editorial too. I think half of it is, intent beforehand, shooting the actual piece, and then how things are laid out editorially, and choices that you make in the edit process. Excuse me. I think really ultimately define so much of what the story is or isn't. So
You're probably familiar with this quote. Alfred Hitchcock once observed, in feature films, the director is God. In documentary films, God is the director. How do you go about researching and casting your films? And Clint, I'm wondering at what point of the process you're often brought in.
It depends. I've worked on several documentaries. A lot of times, as the historian, as the expert, you're brought in pretty late, or in the beginning to try and give some context to the producers and the director. Expedition Unknown, because they only had 2.5 weeks, I acted almost as a producer, and so the night that they called me on October 7th, we stayed up all night long, and I talked about what are the different things you could talk about, the different places you could go, who are the people that could be in this, who are reenactors that can do reenactments for this type of thing. So that was the one opportunity or the one instance where I was there from the very beginning all the way up to the end. And even in the editorial process afterwards, for months, they would call me 2 or 3 times a week, and I would spend hours on the phone just going over the history, and they would tell me what they were doing. So I got to be part of that whole editorial process in that respect.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like showbiz. Are there, what advantages for our audience might there be in going into documentary film as far as opposed to fiction filmmaking?
I think the greatest advantage for me is that I find, as a disclaimer, I find this personally fulfilling. I know some people that find work like this to be grueling or excruciating or extremely difficult because you don't know when the end is. And even you could have what you think is the most fantastic idea for a documentary, and you could go into it and it's absolutely nothing. And so, in my opinion, I do think there's a kind of high risk, high reward, maybe depending on the type of story you want to tell. If you're telling something like in the work that Clint does, that's grounded history that happened and it's indisputable, well, there it is, and you could tell a kind of very very straightforward story. When you have an idea and you're working with a subject that you think something might unfold, or you think an interesting event might coagulate into something, it's a total risk. There might not be a story in something. But I find that the biggest sense of fulfillment and the greatest advantage is finding those stories and having a chance to interact with them is deeply, deeply fulfilling. Because I don't think in any way, shape, or form that you're objective as a documentarian. So I really think that the biggest advantage is getting to bring and own your creative vision and viewpoint, whatever that may be. Bringing that into a space is like inherently alchemical when working with a subject, when working with an event, when working with a group of people. And I just think there's such a great deal of joy from being able to bring a unique story out of whatever that may be. I think that's very, very fulfilling.
What about disadvantages that you've come across in documentary filmmaking? Budget, time?
I mean, everything. I think there's as many, to be completely honest, I think there's as many disadvantages as there are advantages. The one thing that comes to mind is it's an extremely saturated field. One benefit is it's an extremely saturated field. So, gear and equipment is smaller and cheaper and more accessible, and you could spend $3, $4, $5 grand and you could shoot everything yourself. and get away with it. And there are people that are. And there are people that spend a very small amount of money and they shoot excellent feature films. And it's not everyone. But that's a disadvantage too, is it's an extremely saturated film saturated field because it's accessible, the gear is accessible. I think another disadvantage is what I just mentioned is there's just no guarantee.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee. There's so much that's unknown and so much that's fluid about the process of documentary filmmaking. So with a narrative film where you could have have a low, medium, and high budget and raise your money and cast and get your gear and get your crew, you have whatever amount of time to shoot and you go do it and that's that. The documentary filmmaking process varies so much where, again, you could go out thinking, oh, this might take 2 weeks, and 5 years later, you're still neck deep in something that there's no guarantee of. And there's no guarantee you sell it, and there's no guarantee that it ever comes to fruition as something of substance. But again, high risk, high reward. So
Yeah, I was curious about that and how you. Well, I guess you've got a nice kind of shoehorn approach to finding these people and making them comfortable, which is probably half the battle there, and get them free enough to talk with you like a friend. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden. I brought up the idea of truth and honesty in documentaries. So how do you maintain objectivity in your research and vision throughout production? Or are you always so open for something else to happen that you kind of can't go that far in the beginning?
For me personally, I definitely stand on the later side of what you mentioned. I try to stay very, very open. And as far as truth and objectivity is, I'd like to think that I try to be as diligent as humanly possible, and I try to research when I'm doing something that is even remotely historical. I'll try to do my best to research the history, and I'll try to get a multitude of viewpoints and perspectives. When I'm doing something personal, I kind of try to do the same thing too. But I'm really a firm believer that there isn't really objectivity. As soon as I think here's a great example. If Clint and I were given a subject and the same budget and the same timeline, we would make completely different films.
Yes.
Because we're totally different people. And I think that is a huge benefit of documentary filmmaking. But I think that's something I've been, as an artist and a filmmaker, that's something I've been learning to own for myself is, okay, I'm not going into anything without objectivity. I'm bringing my own personal perspectives, my own social, parental, cultural conditioning into something, and the best that I could do as a filmmaker is own that, and own that I have my own vision and my own lens, and try my best to not project or manipulate or twist something to the way that I want. And I think that I do that by going, okay, I'm really not objective. No one is objective, I don't think. And yeah, again, it's alchemical. You can do your best to tell the truth, but that truth is going to vary, I think, from person to person and perspective to perspective. So
I think that's an honest answer. Oh, by the way, Clint has a YouTube video about the Dawn Outlaws that you might want to check out too. It's, I don't know, is it 15 minutes or something like that?
There are several, yes.
Yeah, so quick in and out and learn things that I never knew about these guys at all. And to not stiff the Mercer Museum, get over there too and buy a ticket and enjoy the show. There's quite a lot of stuff there, and you get a teaser on YouTube of what's there to be seen. So let me take a half a step back to the beginning. What exactly is a documentary? And I think what we've come up with, that maybe, just maybe, it doesn't really make any difference, because perhaps all great films and movie experiences actually seem like documentaries, truthful, engaging, entertaining. You may know this quote, Jonathan Demme. It's a funny thing with documentary films. You want them to feel as entertaining and as gripping as a fictional film. With a fictional film, you want it to feel as realistic as a documentary film.
Mm.
Given that, what's the hardest and best lessons you've learned either making documentaries or participating in documentaries?
I think, to touch on something Evan had talked about, several of the documentaries I've worked on have never seen the light of day. It is really a gamble, and some of them are great. It's just that it is a tough thing. It's a saturated field, like you said, and you see these people put in tons of work. The people that made it, that came up with it, the people that worked in it, and it's something that there is no guarantee that it's going to get out there.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way, to be honest. It's nebulous. I really do believe that's the hardest and most rewarding thing. The most rewarding thing is when you do have a successful documentary.
Right.
That could take any amount of time, 6 months, a year, 5 years, whatever it ends up being. I find that just extremely rewarding that you and your filmmakers and by the grace of God, everything comes together, and that's really wonderful. But yeah, there is that high risk that your idea, your subject, whatever it is, might not be what you thought it was, and then furthermore, even if it is something you thought it was, it might not be something that film festivals are interested in. It might not be something that distributors want to pick up right now, and so it is high risk.
Are there any upcoming projects that you're working on that you can tell us about? One or two, or something on a back burner?
Sure. I have a short film in development now about a pretty prominent artist in Wyoming who creates bronze sculpture work that is created over the course of a year. And we're looking to mirror the creation of his work with the change of seasons out in Cody, Wyoming. His work is deeply, deeply connected to the mythos and the kind of spiritual culture of Wyoming, and deeply connected and reflected to the earth. So that's one piece, and then I'm in early development of a film about a Trump supporter and a very hardcore right-wing Christian living in poverty in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and his relationship to his queer artist daughter, who makes a lot of artwork that's around social class and gender identity, and people who she feels were left out by the promise of the American dream. So that's in development. The Wyoming one should start sooner than later.
In the wintertime?
Probably.
Great timing.
Yeah.
Clint, do you have anything coming up?
I do. I have something that I can't really talk about at the moment.
Oh, yeah, sure. Me too. I've got a lot of stuff coming up, but I can't tell you about it. I'd like to. Yogi Berra once said, when you get to a fork in the road, take it. So is there any advice you might give to filmmakers in the audience wanting to break into the business today, whether that be actually on the behest of a museum or behind a camera?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the behest of a museum, a museum is, something that's constantly struggling to try and bring people in. It's not always easy to get people excited about history all the time. So whenever the museum is presented with somebody that wants to make a documentary about history or anything, the museum jumps at the chance for the most part. So, we are always eager to participate in something.
Are you traveling a lot? I assume you're based in Doylestown, or at least Doylestown area, but are you traveling around?
No, and mostly, every documentary I've made has been, my expertise is Bucks County history. So everything I've ever done has been here in Bucks County. But, possibly in the future, something farther away.
Okay. Anything else you guys would like to add to the proceedings here?
I would just say if I was to give any advice, I took the kind of semi-traditional route of going into film school and whatever, working my way up the totem pole from there, which is great. I really, really firmly think if there is anything to share with it, like any upcoming filmmakers or what I would tell to my like young self in film school,
Right.
is find your voice and find your vision first before anything else, because that's going to be paramount. Any of the gear or the intricacies of the industry itself, I think are secondary. I really think the primary prerogative as a filmmaker is to find your unique voice and find what stories are important to tell. I think that's the most important thing and fulfilling thing. Again, a documentary filmmaking is yeah, okay, it might not be your story, but it's your perspective, and I think that's something important to really develop and clarify and own for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and I'm hearing more echoes of that as the years go on. Why did I spend all that money to run a camera? I made one film for my thesis and two 15-minute things, and what do I've got? And 3 years later, that 15-minute piece might not even, you couldn't even show it to anyone. So it's a crazy business, but that's why we love it. Let me sum up here by quoting the author Ursula Le Guin, who said, there have been great societies that did not use the wheel, but there have been no societies that did not tell stories. And these gentlemen here have certainly been able to tell their stories successfully over the years, whether seen on film or in museums. And so please, let's thank them today for sharing their experience and insights with us. And to our audience, let me thank you for your participation. This is a two-way street here. And in a few minutes, invite you to see the main event, this year's Bucks County Film Fest screening and awards night. In the meantime, we hope you'll continue to study, write, direct, and enjoy the joy that movies bring us. Thanks for being a part of the festival.